Our sciences and philosophies have absolutely no idea how life could have emerged out of the substance of matter. The cutting-edge scientific perspective today on the origin of life is not too far removed from the 19th century author Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. You take some organic goo, subject them to bolts of lightning from the heavens, and then cross your fingers and wait for that spark of life to appear through some obscure magic of chemistry. That idea is so painfully imbecilic, it is surprising that it still has so much traction even in our 21st century. The reason why it is so is because our sciences and our philosophies have absolutely no idea what precisely constitutes life. Because the emergence of life is so much more than a random, fortunate chemical accident. The main reason our sciences have been unable to understand life and its origins is because science is only designed to understand the structural universe. There are non-structural domains in the universe which lie outside the purview of scientific investigation, and that applies to the atom as well. If we want to understand how life could emerge out of the substance of matter, we absolutely need an alternative description of the atom, one that can sit alongside the elaborate and very thorough structural description provided by science. Nothing in this theory that I am presenting, which is fractal bifurcations, contradicts any of the established scientific interpretation of the atom, but it looks at the same phenomena from a decidedly alternative perspective, which makes the emergence of life out of matter comprehensible. In this video, I explain what precisely constitutes life. There are a whole constellation of shifts that has to occur before matter can form life. In fact, one has to understand the fundamental nature of consciousness and even the Big Bang before one can understand the origin of life. And yet, the natural world is designed in such a way that if the proper environmental conditions exist, life will take hold anywhere in the universe. In fact, the emergence of life and its subsequent evolution is an essential part of the cosmic agenda. And yes, I did say cosmic agenda because in this theory, fractal bifurcations, the universe is not some mindless cosmic accident. The universe has purpose, it has direction, and a very well-defined rationale for its existence, and life is an essential part of that cosmic agenda. Einstein once remarked that no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. This theory is from that next level of consciousness because it will challenge you to reconfigure the universe from a distinctly alternative perspective. In this video, I only discuss the issues that are necessary to understand the emergence of life out of the substance of matter. And trust me, there's a whole lot more to the origin of life than some random chemical accident with bolts of lightning from the sky. This may surprise you, but the reason our sciences have been having such a hard time figuring out how life could have emerged out of the substance of matter is because we have an incomplete description of the atom. Now, you'd probably say, wait a minute, we've been smashing atoms for over 100 years, and there's very little left to be discovered, if at all, especially now that we have even identified the Higgs boson. Well, yes, science has done an incredible job in deciphering the structural elements within the atom. In fact, I'll go so far to say that it has been such a monumental accomplishment that learning to manipulate matter at the atomic and subatomic realms has been predominantly responsible for ushering in our modern age during the 20th century. However, science has given us only a structural description of the atom. There are non-structural elements within the atom that has eluded scientific scrutiny and which are essential for a complete understanding of the atom and by extension an understanding of how life could emerge out of the substance of matter anywhere in the universe if the appropriate conditions exist. So, what is this great understanding that science has been missing all along? It is that there is much more to the atom than the structural attributes alone. You may remember from high school physics that 99.9999% of the atom is empty space. Well, that statement is only partially true. It is space, but it is not empty. Space is a substance, and as such, it has distinct attributes of its own which are diametrically opposed to those of matter. These non-structural substances within the atom lies outside the purview of scientific investigation because the essential nature of science is that it is structure-based. These chapters in the book provide a complete explanation of the atom according to fractal bifurcations, but here I'm going to restrict myself only to those features which are necessary to explain the emergence of life out of the substance of matter. So let me give you a definition of life according to fractal bifurcations. And this definition would apply to life forms anywhere in the universe. In other words, if there is life anywhere in the universe, and I believe life abounds, it has to conform to this particular definition, which is that life is an expansion-dominant integrated system. By contrast, matter, or more specifically the atom, is a compression-dominant integrated system. For matter to form life, this compression-dominant system has to become an expansion-dominant system, which can only occur under very special circumstances. So here are the essential elements that has to be taken together to understand the emergence of life out of the substance of matter. They are the dual shield structure of the atom, singularity, which is the source of all the energy and awareness in the universe, the singularity unit, integrated systems, matter consciousness versus life consciousness, the energy body, and finally life, death, and evolution. I'm going to take each of these points one by one. So let's start with the structure of the atom itself. Even though science has given us a marvelous description of the atom, it has very little to say about why the atom is designed the way it is, with a very strong and highly introverted nuclear force at the center, surrounded by a much less powerful but highly extroverted electromagnetic force. The nuclear force is compression dominant, meaning that the force is directed inward. By contrast, the electromagnetic force is expansion dominant, that is directed outward, which is the reason the electromagnetic force just can't wait to reach out and bond with neighboring particles, forming molecular bonds. In the language of fractal bifurcations, these two fields have characteristics that are typical of all bifurcated systems. They are completely opposed to each other. You can find out a lot more about bifurcated systems in this chapter in the book. In this theory, I refer to the force fields as shields because that's exactly what they are. That means the atom in the fractal bifurcations model comprises two bifurcated shields with distinctly opposing characteristics. There's an inner compression-dominant nuclear shield and an outer expansion-dominant electromagnetic shield. Matter is compression dominant, and so the inner shield dominates the atom. For life to emerge, there has to be another form of matter which can accommodate expansion dominance, and that would be biomatter. However, before we get to biomatter, I have to first clarify what the dual shields in the atom actually represents. So if there are two shields within the atom, then the obvious question is, what exactly are they shielding? Well, they are shielding a singularity unit at their core. That is the very purpose behind the particular shield structure of the atom. This shield structure of the atom has its origins in the quark, the first expression of matter to emerge with the Big Bang. Even though the quark remains a mystery to science, designating it simply as a fundamental unit of matter. According to this theory, the quark is actually a set of shields hiding a singularity unit within it. So what is a singularity unit and what does it have to do with quarks and the Big Bang? To understand the singularity unit, we have to first understand singularity. Singularity is the unified field out of which our universe came into existence at the Big Bang. Singularity functions within several extra dimensions, perhaps up to 10 or more dimensions of space according to string theory, and therefore it is a completely structureless domain. Adding extra dimensions leads to greater levels of unification, and singularity is a totally unified field and therefore is completely structureless, so much so that this entire field functions as a single integrated entity. In the Fractal Bifurcations model, singularity never disappeared at the Big Bang as generally assumed by science. Singularity is a higher dimensional domain which envelops our three-dimensional universe all the way from the Big Bang to its eventual demise. Singularity has two basic attributes. One is a multi-dimensional substance I refer to as ether, and the other is awareness, both functioning as a completely amalgamated and inseparable substance. Singularity sustains our universe with a perpetual infusion of energy and awareness. The substance of ether, when infused into the integrated systems in the universe, becomes energy. Awareness, when processed through the structures of the universe, becomes consciousness. You'll find a more detailed explanation of singularity and how it came into existence and why it has such a passion for spawning universes one after another in these chapters in the book. The singularity unit is perhaps the most essential element in the universe, but since it is non-structural, it has completely eluded our scientific scrutiny. Without the singularity units embedded within the heart of all matter, the entire universe would instantly collapse. I know what you're thinking. What is he talking about? Hasn't science discovered all the important stuff we need to know about matter? Well, the straight answer is a definite no. To understand the singularity unit, we have to first make sense of what happened within singularity just prior to the Big Bang. So just a moment before the Big Bang, a huge segment of singularity fragmented into infinitesimally tiny holographic units, which are the singularity units. Being holographic, each of these microscopic units incorporate all the characteristics of singularity at large. And these singularity units also function within several extra dimensions. One of the principal attributes of singularity units is that they have the ability to seamlessly merge with each other with a very powerful bonding force. So when the universe came into existence at the moment of the Big Bang, all of these singularity units had to be instantly encased by a set of shields to prevent them from coalescing back into the state of singularity, which would have defeated the very enterprise of constructing a new universe. The first instant of the Big Bang is recognized today as inflation, which lasted for less than a trillionth of a second. According to Fractal Bifurcations, this was the moment during which all the singularity units were extruded into the newly forming universe. At the next instant, all of these singularity units had to be instantly shielded by the strings and specks, which were also extruded out of singularity. Together, the singularity unit guarded by a set of shields became the quarks. All the quarks that would make up all the matter in the universe were extruded in that single explosive moment, which is recognized today as the Big Bang. You will find a more detailed explanation of the Big Bang in this chapter in the book. In the Fractal Bifurcations model, both structured matter and non-structured space are actually two kinds of substances that bifurcated out of singularity at the Big Bang. The initial set of shields encasing a singularity unit became a quark. What science recognizes as the quark is only the outer shell, the structured boundary. Encased within it lies a unit of speck. And what is a speck? A speck is a fundamental unit of the substance of space. This is a graphic rendition of fractal bifurcations and explains how the universe emerged from singularity. This theory explains how strings and specks came into existence within singularity just prior to the Big Bang. The quark, which is the first expression of matter after the Big Bang, is actually bifurcated. It has a set of bifurcated shields. Together, the outer boundary and the speck form a set of shields encasing the singularity unit within it. All of these three components taken together, one structural and the other two non-structural, becomes the quark. All the quarks, which would eventually form all the matter in the universe, had to encase the singularity units in one single Planck moment, which is about a trillionth of a second. That was the very reason the universe had to begin with such an explosive force, which we know as the Big Bang. So is the singularity unit some kind of exotic matter? Well, not quite. I prefer to see the singularity unit as a conduit, a connecting link between our three-dimensional universe and the higher dimensional singularity which envelops our universe through every point in space. So what is the function of the singularity units? Well, it is through these units that singularity infuses and sustains the universe of matter and space with constant flow of energy and awareness. The energy that is infused into the universe from singularity only impacts upon the substance of space, both free space as well as the space confined within the particle. It causes free space to expand at a steady rate, which is recognized today as dark energy. It is this force that propels a photon, a particle of zero mass, across space at light speed, because a photon is a quantum particle and it is aligned with the substance of space. Within an atom, it is this force which causes that quantum jiggle and therefore makes it impossible to arrive at temperatures like absolute zero. And this force is probably the root cause behind radioactivity. It is this infusion that gives us and all life forms our life force, without which life could not exist, and I'll elaborate upon this a bit later. Now, what is the source of all this energy streaming in from singularity into the universe? The source of all this energy are the trillions of black holes in the universe transmuting vast amounts of matter and space into singularity itself, from where it is recycled back into the universe through all the integrated systems. Around 6 to 7 billion years after the Big Bang, our universe was able to generate sufficient number of black holes to become a self-sustaining system. You can find out a lot more about black holes and their function in the universe in the book in this chapter titled Black Holes. As I had mentioned earlier, a key feature of the singularity unit is that it bonds seamlessly with other singularity units, becoming increasingly more powerful with each merging, but always functioning as a single entity. So when quarks bond with other quarks, for example, when three quarks bond to form a neutron or a proton, the singularity units within them merge seamlessly with each other, becoming exponentially more powerful. That means they are able to draw in a proportionally greater amount of energy from singularity. As the intensity of the singularity unit grows, the rudimentary shielding provided by the quarks are no longer sufficient. They require additional layers of shielding and a more improved version of shielding. That is where the basic structure of the atom comes in. As I had mentioned, the singularity unit, regardless of the number of quarks that merge in the nucleus of the atom, always functions as a single entity. This is the reason an atom or a life form can be identified as a single individual entity. But not so with molecules, because in molecular bonding, the singularity units of the atoms do not merge. However, when life emerges, biomatter is able to resolve that problem. The distinction between molecular bonding and cellular bonding is that in the latter, in cellular bonding, the life form is able to grow while maintaining its integrity as an individual entity, which molecules are unable to do. This chapter, titled Integrated Systems, explains how everything in the universe, from the atom to the life form to space itself, are all plugged into the cosmic wall socket, which is, of course, the high-dimensional singularity. In the Fractal Bifurcations model, the entire universe can be categorized into just a handful of integrated systems. All integrated systems function as a single entity. The reason why any integrated system, whether an atom or a life form, functions as a single entity is because they have a singularity unit at their core. An integrated system can be regarded as a micro-universe all unto itself, because of all the elements that make up the universe are within that integrated system, which can be illustrated by this four-quadrant chart. All integrated systems have 2 feet in the universe, meaning that it embodies both the two substances of matter and space, which comprise the universe, and it has 2 feet in singularity, meaning that it is continually infused with energy and awareness, 2 attributes of singularity itself. The compression-dominant nucleus dominates the atom, while the expansion-dominant substance of space within the atom functions in a subdominant state. If somehow we were to have an integrated system that is able to function in expansion dominance, then we would have the incipience of life. Now, the structured matter becomes the physical body, while the spatial substance becomes the energy body. A change from compression dominance to expansion dominance requires a kind of atom that is especially suited for such a shift, one which is not too light nor too heavy, one where the compression and expansion forces within the atom are closely balanced. The carbon atom is precisely suited for such a shift. 2 carbon atoms in a molecular bond, for instance, would have the inclination of spontaneously merging the singularity units at their core and function, even if momentarily, as a single expansion-dominant system. The merging of the singularity units at their core is key to any system functioning as an individual entity. However, within matter, such spontaneous mergings between 2 atoms would just as quickly revert back to their compression-dominant status, unless they were in a suitable environment that could stabilize such an expansion dominance. It appears that carbon-based organic compounds in a watery or fluid environment are best suited to stabilize such spontaneous shifts to expansion dominance. If that stabilization holds, then it would mark the emergence of life out of the substance of matter. If an atom is the fundamental integrated unit of matter, then a cell is a fundamental integrated unit of life.